Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Book of the Month podcast. This month's theme is horror. Woohoo! I'm
Ookie.
I am Rachel, and I am joined with Dan.
Hi, I'm Dan Evanson.
Nick.
Nick here. Woo.
And maybe, and last but maybe least, Peter.
I'm Peter.
That's so harsh.
I don't know how tall Peter is.
Oh, okay. We're going by height. I'm pretty sure I lost that game.
I'm shorter when I sit.
I don't know. I don't know what you guys look like.
I look shorter when I sit. I just told you.
That's all you need to know.
Wait a minute. Aren't we missing one?
He shrinks and grows.
Yeah, unfortunately, Katie could not join us. She texted me and said that she was looking in a used bookstore for the book of this month, but she found a black hardback with a tree embossed on the cover with no title. After she started reading it, she started seeing things.
That sounds ominous.
That's the worst thing to see.
She was unfortunately admitted to an asylum. She should be back next month, and she might make her presence known.
Was the book bound in human skin? Because I've lost my copy, and I've been looking for it.
You know, it might have been. I don't remember.
I'll have to
Katie,
take it up with
if you
Katie.
can hear us, send word to Peter about his lost book.
He kind of wants that back.
Well, you know, I don't hear anything. Maybe, I don't know, maybe she's trying to reach out.
I don't know. Anyways, does anyone have any discussion about horror that they want to start with?
I wrote a horror book, you guys. I wrote one. It's available for sale now. I'm sponsoring this episode.
Our second sponsor.
That's awesome. I didn't know that.
Who was our first sponsor?
You.
That's right. Yeah, I wrote a book. It's called Dave Woke Up. It is actually, the premise of the book is somewhat similar to what's happened to Katie. So she is the best marketing strategy I have right now. Yeah, it's very like a sort of autobiographical too, of like a guy working in an office setting who goes a little crazy because his job is so boring. So luckily I don't have that life anymore because I've exercised it by writing a book about it and then got fired from that job. So
Was the book involved in the firing, if you don't mind me asking?
No, totally unrelated.
I
I
figured maybe
assume.
your boss didn't like the way you wrote about him.
I'm sure she didn't like me in general.
Sorry.
So yeah.
I might have just bought your book right now.
Oh no.
You know who else can
Since
buy
you
the
bought
book
it,
right
Peter,
now?
Weird.
Everyone listening, you can buy the book right now.
Be like Peter. Buy that book. Dave Woke Up by Daniel Evanson. Available on Amazon.
I'll put the link in.
Be like me.
Oh my god.
I don't want to be like you. Oh.
Thanks for encouraging everyone in the creepiest way possible.
But I want to be a cat.
Meow.
That's true. Wow, that's great. So yeah, I think I might pick up a copy of that too and give it a read pretty soon. With Halloween coming up.
Thanks. Someone once rated it 3 stars and said it was the most mediocre book he'd ever read. So you guys are in for a treat.
What
See,
a plug.
if I liked horror, I would read it. Also, I'm poor.
I'm sure we can donate a copy to your college education
Yeah,
fund.
Okay,
no,
hold on.
absolutely. Yes, you can have a copy for free. See, you guys should have waited.
Jacqueline M. Jasek says, this book took many unexpected turns, that it kept you on your toes and wondering. Very well written for a brand new author. Unique, fun, thrilling. The flow of the book worked pretty well. I loved the ending. Another unexpected part. Definitely give this author and this book a try. That's the
There you
end.
go.
That's it. Yeah.
If
They
you
do
would
have some
like
good
your-
reviews too, yeah.
If you would like your name read on the podcast, review us on iTunes.
Leave us a 5-star review on Amazon.
Are we available on Audible? Is that how we'll get Audible sponsorship finally, is just by putting ourselves on the service?
God, I hope so. I'll tell you, the book I read this month was an audiobook. So I'm yet again trying. I'm trying so hard, Audible.
This is the first book that I read that wasn't on Audible. I feel betrayed.
That's true.
But really, didn't you betray Audible by reading up in person?
When they get manga on the site, I'll do that, but I don't think
I
so.
know. I'm not sure how that would work for a visual medium. Yes.
That's because it's called an anime.
That's true.
This page is divided into 7 panels. The first panel covers the entire page, while the 6 panels below it each cover half page width. In the first panel,
it's like Netflix's descriptive audio, just describing scenes to you. It's pretty. I'm actually on board.
Translator note: Kukaku means plan.
I did not know that.
I think I butchered that word. I apologize.
It's all right. Let's get back to horror a little bit here. Dan, I'm interested that you wrote a horror book, though, because one of the questions I kind of wanted to ask you guys about was, how do you write horror? What makes it different?
There's two different ways. First being that you can just make it a tragedy, right? The expectation of an unhappy ending can sometimes help you get into that sort of horror mindset. And
is that because it builds tension?
Yeah, and it helps set expectations, with the idea that the wrong thing is going to happen, and that is the intended way that the story is going to progress.
So, but that comes from sort of a narrative expectation on the reader's part, right?
Right.
They have enough, experience with stories that they think, okay, the way this one is reading, it sounds like it's going to all go bad, so I'm growing increasingly anxious, hopefully in a good way, as I anticipate things going all to hell.
Right. And I think, that you can get a lot of mileage out of that just by setting that up and then twisting it around, setting up unhappy endings that then reveal themselves to be happy ones. That's some of the best horror that I read, is stuff that does that to me. Where I'm like, there's no way this is going to turn out good, and then somehow it does.
Interesting. So some of your favorite horror actually has happy endings.
Yeah, there's Lovecraft Country, which I think came out last year, which is a story set in New England, which is about African-American people trying to live in a Jim Crow America in New England and different parts of the country, and then also tinged with the sort of cosmic Lovecraftian horror. It is so effective because it spends so much of its time just showing you the reality of the times, and you're just like, well, there's just no way, even if they overcome these awful supernatural elements, the just human society will crush them. But finding a happy ending in those circumstances just makes for a really satisfying read.
I believe that.
I feel like a lot of people read horror to be scared, but I guess, are you looking for a happy
ending? That's the second way, I think, to write it, is that you're really writing a thriller at that point, and you just have a supernatural element to it, and that kind of makes it horror.
It's interesting because, when I think of a horror movie, for example, I think of jump scares and stuff like that, and you really can't do that in a book. And I feel like you really have to rely on. Yeah, I feel like you really have to rely on tension a lot more.
No, I think you turn the page, and then there's a picture of Freddy from Five Nights at Freddy's,
or just "boo" written in the largest font.
Babadook.
I hate the Babadook. I prefer horror novels that have happy endings. I don't like, I read Stephen King this week, and he's sort of famous for, if not flubbing his endings, then having endings that people tend to dislike. In a lot of cases, those are because he's like, hey, what actually happens in real life is nobody has an happy ending, and the story is never really over. If something really traumatic happens to you, you're probably not going to be an okay person, 5 years after that happens. So sorry, that's how the world is. There you go. Those can sometimes be tough reads, especially because when I read horror novels like that, the worst part is that I feel like I have to stop reading anything for a little while afterwards just to get over my own sort of psychic trauma of experiencing.
Mm-hmm. You need recovery time.
Yeah.
That's amazing that it affects you that much.
Where it's the opposite when I read good fantasy or good sci-fi, because those usually build on each other. Those kinds of books usually send me off to find similar books, and horror is the opposite. Oftentimes horror
you need a
take a break. Yeah.
It's funny, I didn't know Stephen King had that reputation for dissatisfying endings. When I think of dissatisfying endings, I think of apologies in advance, Neil Stephenson. It's not a horror writer. It's not exactly to the theme for the day.
I think they have that reputation for the same reason. I think that, both of them are really great at those first 2/3 of a book, and then they have a little trouble paying off, what they set up. It's almost as if they think they set up something different. I mean, Stevenson sometimes the last third of his novel will be a second, like a totally separate book that, inserted itself in, or he's like, hey, I want to know what happens to these characters, 20, 30 years from the end of my actual story. And then he'll put that book in, like a mini sequel almost into the back end.
Yeah.
A King is, his issue is usually more like what I was talking about, where, I would say earlier King, like sort of 80s, 90s King, he oftentimes would, just leave his characters in distress by the end and didn't really give you a satisfying ending, or his ending was so off the wall and unconnected that it felt very dissatisfying. Like, I don't know, did you guys read Under the Dome? Which I
never did.
I watched the first episode of the TV show and dropped it.
Yeah, Under the Dome is a weird one. I'm just going to spoil Under the Dome for you guys for a little bit, and so readers, spoiler alert. But Under the Dome is about people that in a little town in New England, as all Stephen King is, and they find themselves trapped under this transparent dome, and they can't get out, and other people can't get in. 90% of the novel is an amazing book about people trying to live under these circumstances and how their own secrets and the town's political situation affects them just trying to live. And the ultimate solution of how they get out of the dome is unrelated entirely to the things that happen within the dome. Ultimately ends up being weird alien children who are essentially holding a magnifying glass and burning the little ants that are humans. So that part of it doesn't come up until like the last 10 pages. And then all of a sudden you're supposed to care about weird alien children and why they're murdering humans, sort of. So it's just disconnect.
I had that feeling recently. I was playing a video game, and they just killed off a character I met 2 seconds ago, and I was supposed to care about that character's death, but I'm like,
right.
But I don't.
I don't at all. Oh, the video game that I think of when I think of horror is, what was it called? It was a long time ago. Eternal Darkness. Anyone else play that?
Oh, the Dennis Dyack classic, Eternal Darkness. Yes.
I think of Bloodborne, but that's just me.
Eternal Darkness is the game where you were playing it and your character has a madness level.
Yeah.
And as they get more mad,
I remember that.
The effects would happen to you, the player, sometimes, and not just your character in the game. So like you'd get a screen that made it look like the game had restarted or shut down, and it give you just enough time to walk over to your N64, and all of a sudden it would snap back and you're like, oh, you bloody bastards.
Right. I was about to restart this or see what was wrong when the game admitted that it was tricking me. Like, for example, there's one moment. The game is 15 at least years old. So
yeah, I feel like spoiler is expired.
We're past due, yeah. But like where you push the start button to go check your inventory, and you go in and it's empty, and you look around, like you move your cursor around and you can't find any of your stuff that you've been collecting. And it gives you just long enough to spike your adrenaline and panic before like your character holds their head and says, "Oh, this can't be happening." And then it all goes right.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Isn't the main character like a young female, if I'm remembering correctly?
Yeah, a young woman, and then it kind of skips back and forth through time where you play other characters, I think, as she reads about them.
Okay, this is the correct game that I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
So horror is this very interesting genre that stems, like, horror video games are probably at their most popular right now.
Are they?
I think so. I see so many YouTubers in particular playing horror games.
The jump scare was brought up earlier, and I have trouble thinking of that as actual horror.
Well, no, there are still like some actually like very deep horror games that aren't just all jump scares?
The YouTuber that I follow right now, I think she's playing Sinking City, Blair Witch Project, and maybe Call of Cthulhu. I think those are all horror games. I haven't watched them because I don't like horror that much.
Yeah, I think I've seen a couple of those games too.
Okay.
Being played. It's just interesting how different mediums they approach horror differently. You know what I mean?
Oh,
yeah,
for
you know,
sure.
Call of Cthulhu is having a little resurgence with its RPG. You know, Critical Role just did an episode of Call of Cthulhu. I think Penny Arcade is doing a Call of Cthulhu thing at the next PAX Australia.
Huh.
Yeah, it's a really interesting take on the RPG because, you know, I think Dungeons and Dragons now is set up as a game where you very rarely are going to have character death unless you're really kind of going out of your way in the early levels. But
Right.
Call of Cthulhu is a game where death is on the table and, in fact, expected. By the end of that game, you will almost very rarely win a game of Call of Cthulhu.
Right.
I think because they accept that horror premise of they're not necessarily happy endings to these stories.
Yeah, or it's you know, you go in expecting to come out insane and or dead.
Yeah,
But
the happy ending of just being the insane person at the end and not the dead person.
Yeah. Or at least I'm still alive.
So in terms of talking about horror, though, for books, we were talking about, you know, it's like, oh, you're writing like a thriller or like really just focusing on tension, which is, I mean, essentially the same thing. What are some other ways, I guess, that you can, in a book, do this? Like demonstrating madness in the RPG Call of Cthulhu or in some of these video games that we've talked about. Is there a way that you can make like the reader feel like they're going insane? And do people do that?
I'd like there to be. Go ahead, Rachel.
I feel like that would just be similar to like Unreliable Narrator and
Yeah.
things. I haven't seen it personally. I tried to, as I said before, I tend to avoid literature with horror, but I like more visual stuff I get into, like manga or anime and stuff like that.
Yeah, horror manga, I think they do a lot of that, but I guess that's not really what Nick. You're just talking about words on the page, trying to convince someone that they are crazy. I can't really think of any off the head. I feel like I know for sure that there is at least one out there where the narrator's so unreliable that they are. I wonder if maybe like Annihilation would be one like that. I really think Annihilation is pretty horror, although it gets slotted into sort of the cosmic horror.
Yeah, it's certainly either cosmic or weird horror or something. I only read the first book.
Yeah, me too. I did not terribly. That is the kind of cosmic horror I do not like, which is that it gets to the end and it's sort of like, was this even real? Was there a reason? Here's a bunch of stuff I didn't explain. I'm never going to. See you later.
This is what happened. No answers. Bye.
Yeah.
I saw there was a premise for an anime that I saw that kind of did that. I can't remember the name of it. It was just like this young girl creates a idyllic persona, kind of, because there's a zombie apocalypse going on and she just wanted to forget, and her friends are trying to help her keep that bubble, I guess.
Oh, interesting. So she's like describing the world around her that is a zombie apocalypse, but she's erasing the horror elements herself.
I feel like I've only seen the like promos for the anime. It was like, oh, you see what she's seeing, I guess, and it's like, oh yeah, she's just at school. Things are happening at school, but no, it's really just a zombie apocalypse is going on, and she's trying to forget that she's in a zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that would be super interesting to read. You know, somebody who's so in denial of what's actually going on. I mean, that's a pretty common horror trope of it's not real. If I don't look, if I just keep ignoring it, it'll go away.
So I found my book, that human skin bound book, and it turns out there's some new words appearing on it just in blood as I watch, and they're signed Katie. So I think I'll pose them to y'all and hopefully spread the curse. I mean, just share this information we can talk about it.
Oh my gosh.
This entity purporting to be Katie asks if the only difference between horror and thriller is the supernatural. And then, like, what are the different subgenres of horror and what do they mean? Like, we were tossing out the words cosmic horror, weird horror. Now, I don't know how commonplace those are. I think cosmic horror sees a lot of use in language. I think weird horror maybe less so. I just said words that maybe felt like they went together.
I guess we were throwing around a lot of terminology here. Maybe we should try to really break it down a little bit more.
I feel like weird horror comes from like weird fantasy. You know, that's a subset of fantasy, right? I'm not making that up.
I think so.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think you can add any adjective and you'll find some books that fit it. Like there's weird fantasy sounds to me like it's similar to slipstream fiction, which is a slippery genre I've not really been able to pin down.
Yeah, I mean, it also branches into like what's sometimes called the new weird, which is, like China Mieville, all the work that he does. You know, if you've ever read Perdido Street Station, there's a lot of horror elements in that novel, but I feel like it falls pretty solidly in the fantasy genre, not necessarily horror. Although there are giant interdimensional moths that eat people's brains. So
and body horror elements because there are whose heads.
Body horror is one of
that's the whole subgenre itself. Yeah,
I hate that so much. Body horror is, for those of you who don't know, is basically
the worst.
It's like stuff's going on inside your own body, right?
It's losing control of your own body, having your body like turn against you in alien ways. Alien is a great example of like, oh gosh, I am a host to some kind of weird parasite that's going to burst out of my chest and eat it.
Fun fact.
Right.
Alien is the only horror movie my dad has ever watched. He refuses to watch anymore.
Wow, Alien broke him.
Yeah, I think it's genetic. I don't...
My buddy Adam on the other podcast, Why Is This a Thing, and Movie Hall of Fame, his favorite movie of all time probably is Alien. He absolutely loves that series, and he never shuts up about it. So.
It is a great movie, although that reminds me.
It is great.
Brief, unaffiliated plug. There's a podcast called The Film Reroll. Did I talk about this before? They basically take the starting premise for popular movies, assign characters to the players, and then play it out, but with die rolls that generally change things. And one of the ones that they did was Alien, and with the players in control of the various characters, things went very differently.
Yeah, I remember you did talk about this at one point.
Okay.
I don't know if it was on the air or not, but I remember you talked, I think, Star Wars.
Yes, they were doing Rogue One.
I guess that's body horror, but like, I guess the other two we really mentioned that we should probably get into is like cosmic horror and supernatural. The traditional horror that we think of is this supernatural horror, which is, maybe we can break it down further even from here, but when I think supernatural, I think, you have like ghosts and witches and vampires and werewolves, all of the sort of stereotypical tropes.
Yeah, I mean, I think where horror butts up to fantasy is in supernatural fantasy. You can have stories about ghosts and vampires and werewolves that are not horror. I think like the Sookie Stackhouse True Blood stories are kind of that way. They're not really horror. They are more fantasy than anything else. But where you get horror is when there is a fear element, that's introduced to those things, that the werewolf or the zombie or the vampire is not a thing that you can talk to. It does not necessarily represent like a human value. And that's when it's horror, when there's a component that exceeds human understanding, something that's outside of human understanding that makes it so that it's horror, because there's nothing to do at that point but run and scream. So
horror isn't as much about content as it is about the experience elicited from the reader.
I think.
Yeah, perspective, I think, also fits a lot into it. Yeah. And cosmic horror is that to like the nth degree, right?
It is Lovecraft.
Not only. Yeah, I mean, I hate to give that guy credit for it, but I guess
I'm sorry.
He's usually attributed as the start. No, I mean that's not an uncommon opinion, but yeah, I mean, the cosmic horror is when you are presented with something, and what Lovecraft loved to do was be like, he beheld something which could not be described, and then he'd spend 3 pages describing it. So it is usually the thing that stretches out its umbral tentacles, and then drove the person insane just by looking at it, kind of horror.
Well, and I think it's often supposed to, like it involves other dimensions. It's supposed to give you the feeling that the cosm is so much bigger than you, which it is anyway, but gives you this feeling that it's just completely uncaring. You don't matter, and this supernatural universe around you, can just crush you like an ant.
Like you stare into the abyss and the abyss stares back, kind of thing.
and then giggles and then
Right.
eats you. Yeah.
King writes a lot of cosmic horror, I think, that doesn't get properly attributed as cosmic horror because he's typically known for more down-to-earth stories, but invariably he will tell, if you ask the source, or if the source of the horror is described in the book, it will reach into those sort of cosmic spaces. You know, if people are out this weekend enjoying it, you will definitely get a taste of
some of King's cosmic horror. You're right.
for sure. The end of It Part 2 is very much cosmic horror.
I think the thing with King is that he sort of is so big. He's sort of his own genre. You know, there are people who I assume don't read a lot of horror, but they read King.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, he's the Tom Clancy of,
of
the horror genre. Right? Yeah, you might not read war novels, but you probably are at least exposed to Tom Clancy in some manner.
Or like John Grisham and all of those folks.
Yeah, you may not like law procedurals, but you probably have heard of The Firm or something like that. Yeah.
As I like to call those authors, they're the ones that you buy their book in the grocery store.
Yes.
Right, exactly. Or the airport.
Right,
like,
exactly.
Oh, God, I have 8 hours to kill. Someone hand me a book.
Anything but James Patterson.
Right,
Yes.
exactly. It's another one. So are there any other
Like subgenres
that we haven't hit, I guess?
One that we haven't mentioned that I like a lot, kind of, especially in like manga or anime, is psychological.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that is like what I love about subgenres is that they all crisscross so much.
Yeah.
But that one's sort of like body horror gets into that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a body horror to be psychological. We said the cosmic one is like it drives you insane, but psychological in and of itself could be independent of both of those.
My favorite example would probably be like Psychopaths, that anime, which I like that.
What is the anime?
It is where it's cops and they can arrest you for just having a different affect, or your mood is not perfect. You're like, they're basically preventative copping.
Yeah,
Okay.
where everyone is tracked by a massive computer system that can decide the chance of you becoming a criminal are too high, then you're arrested.
Okay, so it's Philip K. Dick's pre-crime Minority Report sort of thing.
Yeah, there is a lot of like body horror and weirdness in that show for sure.
They have like their murders are very similar to like Criminal Minds on that kind of grotesque aspect of like how the bodies are found.
That's another thing is like whether or not horror needs to be graphic.
Oh, interesting.
I find myself somewhat ambivalent on that. I don't mind the gore, so to speak, in a book, but I don't need it.
Yeah, I feel like it's a crutch for some people. Not that using it is always a crutch, but I feel like it can be.
Yeah, it's an easy button.
Right. It's like, oh, you want to be scared? Let me describe 30 dead babies in a room to you. It's like, okay, come on, like, was that necessary?
You lost me after the third dead baby.
Right. I've actually read probably a lot of horror that maybe could have even used more, where they're trying to just rely on tension, but it doesn't feel like there are any stakes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We were talking about manga. I think my favorite horror manga, and actually I'm not sure if it goes all the way to horror or is just a thriller, but it's called Monster, which is about a guy who's a doctor who, as part of being a doctor, he saves a little kid's life, but then that little kid grows up to be a serial killer. Mm-hmm. And also maybe the next Hitler or something like that. It's an amazing piece of work.
Grows up to be a serial Hitler.
I think that's the #1 manga on my anime list, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Naoki Urasawa, I think, is the guy that wrote it. Yeah. If that's a man, I'm not sure.
They.
Yeah, I should ungender that, yes.
Do we want to move on to reviews? I think we could probably follow them up with trying to figure out what genre they fall into.
Yeah, I think we could fall down this hole all day, so we probably should.
As the current introductor, I vote that Nick goes first.
You want me to? All right. You guys always throwing me under the bus.
That's our job.
Otherwise, why am I driving this bus?
Now I'm scared. I hope you don't have a license.
Not for a bus.
In typical fashion, I'm trying to be atypical by reading something that isn't really a book. I listened to, on Audible, The Darkwater Bride by Marty Ross. So if you guys have Audible, like every month they have you could pick 2 free audiobooks that are Audible originals. And they tend to be a little different. Some of them are almost more like a documentary style, but just audio. This particular one was essentially an audio recording meant to be like a theatrical play to a degree.
So kind of like a radio play?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we've heard these types of things before, but very heavy on the sound effects, full cast.
Neat.
So an audio drama.
Yeah. Earlier I was saying it can be kind of difficult to write horror because you can't rely on jump scares and things like that. But this thing with the sound effects it uses, really good. I'll talk about the story a little bit, but really I think it's the way it's done more than what is said that makes it a great listen. So it takes place in a Victorian London. A Scottish girl visits London to go identify the body of her father. She ends up staying in the city to try and investigate how he died. And the young officer who brought her from Scotland over to London to identify the body, he sort of, he's a young guy, he's single, and he sort of starts to, fall for this girl. So he decides to help her secretly against his own captain's orders, try to investigate instead of sending her home like he should have. So there's a fictional river in this version of London called the Darkwater. Basically what you come to find is that the river is essentially haunted by what they call the Darkwater Bride. It's a female that basically kills men, typically bad men who are sexual predators or abusers, physical abusers, stuff like that. And she sort of drowns them, but not necessarily even in the river. She has this ability to just sort of cause bubbling, dirty, dark water to just suddenly fill their lungs and pour out their eyes and ears. And it's very, the sound effects of water dripping and the ghostly sounds, the use of echoes even just really adds a very eerie element to every bit of this story.
It felt evocative.
Oh my gosh. It was spooky. So yeah, if you just in time for Halloween, if you get a chance to pick this up on Audible, I highly recommend it. I've always been a fan of these sort of audio dramas like this.
So is it Audible only, or?
I believe it's Audible only, like an Audible original.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I got it for free a few months ago, because it was one of those Audible originals they were trying to promote.
So I have another bloody message appearing on my skin.
Oh, God.
Just sort of etching in there as though someone were cutting me.
You sound so calm about it.
It's very strange.
Skin, Peter?
Sometimes.
Oh, God.
But so can you imagine, I'm paraphrasing here, can you imagine feeling the same way about the story in a written form instead of listening to the audio drama with the multiple actors and all the Foley work that sucked you in? How might it have worked as a book?
Yeah, I'm not sure it would have. Not that it wouldn't have worked. I don't think it would have worked nearly as well. That's for sure. The book is sort of two types. It's not only is it this sort of horror or spookiness, but it's also essentially like a mystery. They're trying to solve the murder of her father, even though the reader knows right at the beginning sort of what happened to her father. I mean, actually, you really don't. The first chapter opens up with just a giant mishmash of sounds and sound effects from throughout the book. And it's almost seemingly random, and you can hardly make sense of what's going on. And then if you listen to that first chapter again at the end, you can identify where each of those sounds came from throughout the story. Effects like that you really can't pull off. You just can't in a written way. Also, because it was sort of solving a mystery, they're going around and there's all these false leads and stuff. I think reading it would have felt a lot more like a bunch of loose ends that didn't get tied up. Whereas in this audio drama fashion, everything was just, I don't know, just built a lot of tension. A lot of tension.
Enough that you didn't feel the need to sort of follow every loose plot thread.
At that point, I think you were more focused on, how is she going to get out of here alive?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they give you some direction as the reader that you would not get if you had a book in front of you.
So one thing I do want to say also is that this book is probably, I would consider it 18 plus. There are some things in there that are pretty, I mean, there are prostitutes and there are some bits of sexual stuff. It's not too heavy, and the main character is, she's sort of a lady, you might say. But, so, it's not necessarily focused around her, but, she is going to the darker parts of London, trying to track what her father was up to. And you find, obviously, like I said, the Darkwater bride kills men of bad reputation. Well, her father was, out, as you come to find, spoiler, he's buying prostitutes out in London and beating them and things like that. It's pretty dark in that sense and pretty adult. Like I said, a lot of tension, really good use of sound. It's an experience.
That's cool. I love stuff like that. There's a lot of like horror podcasts that have come out that I enjoy saving up for this time of year. Yeah.
Oh, what's the very, very famous one? It's slipping my mind right now.
Welcome to Night Vale.
Welcome to Night Vale. Yeah, that's that's the one everybody mentions. Those things are becoming a lot more popular, and I mean, I think they've always been popular to a degree before television.
Well, I think they fill some of the same space as audiobooks now.
Yeah, Welcome to Night Vale and their productions like Within the Wires are really spooky.
I love Within the Wires. It's maybe my favorite podcast right now.
Season 4 is coming out.
All right, Rachel, roll the bones again. Tell us whose review is coming up next.
1 second, let me get my D4.
We need to scry to discover what's happening.
That is Peter.
Peter, are you there?
What?
Peter.
What?
Did you die?
What? No, I don't. Let me check. Oh, heartbeat. I'm good.
Well, before we get to Peter, Nick, what was the book again?
Yeah, the book was called The Darkwater Bride by Marty Ross.
Okay.
Highly recommend it.
Okay, well, then I'll run up. I took a bit of a cop-out, I guess. I kept failing to think of a horror novel specifically, or horror something that I wanted to read, imbibe, digest. Instead, I just pretended that the thing I was already reading satisfied the requirements. Which it's not entirely wrong. It's a fantasy novel. The book is called Princess of Blood by Tom Lloyd. He's an author I've been enjoying lately. It's the second in a, I believe, trilogy. The first one is called Stranger of Tempest. My excuse for using this book this month is that it involves some sort of ancient labyrinth that opens up underneath a city. Horrors, they don't start pouring out, but people who creep into the labyrinth trying to explore for lost treasure end up almost inevitably getting eviscerated by, as far as I can tell, giant ghost spiders.
Wow.
Yeah, well, that's traditional, giant ghost spider. And when we follow the main characters who find a way to delve more safely into the labyrinth beneath the city, well, it ends up letting them into what is effectively... Has anyone seen Cube?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know of its general existence.
Yeah, you don't need to watch it, I think, Rachel. If this is your attitude toward horror, then... But it's basically a giant labyrinth of identical rooms where if you don't go the right way, it tries to kill you. And you have to try to figure out how to go the right way. So in a way, horror escape room labyrinth sort of thing that was couched inside a more general fantasy novel. I've enjoyed it very much. I've been looking at this series as something that I could make a role-playing game out of. It keeps striking me as having elements that I want in a role-playing game, such as magical guns, mage guns, they call them, which you load with a single shot each time, so it makes each shot kind of count more, and the magical bullets, so to speak, have different effects depending on if they were made by an ice mage or a fire mage or etc.
That could be fun.
Yeah, well, exactly. I really like that sort of specific resource management is the wrong term. That puts me in mind of, counting every arrow, that sort of thing. But I there's something that speaks to me about having just one, shot, and it has to be the right kind. Yeah, so we got to follow a team of mercenaries and tomb delvers as they explored this labyrinth and tried not to die and tried to survive the other people also trying to explore the labyrinth so that they could find all the treasures for the oppressive military religious order that wants to possess them all. It was fun. I enjoyed it a great deal. I'm looking forward to the third one.
I'm noticing you have like a type of book that you like to read.
Uh-oh.
I feel like you often follow like mercenaries.
Okay, well, that's true. The last book I talked about was The Black Company, wasn't it?
I feel like the last couple.
Shoot, what was before that one?
It was the R.A. Salvatore, the Crystal Shard.
Oh, well, there's nothing mercenary about that.
Maybe it was the
just
first one.
100% classic fantasy. Well, if only I could remember what I read. That would be nice. That would really help this conversation.
I mean, we've done so many episodes. How can you recall?
It was A Land Fit for Heroes.
Thank you. A land. Okay, I have so many. Okay, that's true.
And also, your role-playing game is like
Well, there are no mercenaries. It's
no, but diving into the tombs.
Oh, for sure. Yes, absolutely.
It's just as you were describing it, I'm like, oh, this definitely sounds like something Peter would love. Like, it just based on the limited information I have about
It's possible I have a type. I'm not sure.
The Ouija board next to me is asking me a question from the great beyond.
Why do you have a Ouija board next to you?
Why don't you?
I'm going to ask this question. How big of an impact does magic have on the world?
Well, and the answer ends up being just massive, because the only way you can make these mage bullets is by using these ancient artifacts that are considered to be fragments of the dead gods, which is why these religious orders hoard them, both because they're sacred objects in their faiths, but also because having these artifacts lets you make mage bullets, which then lets you basically dominate the world militarily. It sure is convenient that pursuing one's faith gives one temporal power enough to conquer nation states.
Does that also imply that they're finite?
I don't think, as far as I understand, because the mechanism hasn't been deeply explained, as far as I understand, the ancient fragments are not expended in the process. They're sort of a catalyst or a focus.
Got it.
It sounds like a thriller, kind of, if you had to put a genre on it, like a thriller fantasy.
If I had to, I would say, sure, tense thriller fantasy-ish.
Ish.
Yeah, I'm just gonna call it. It's in the ish genre. It's genre-ish.
John Grisham? Did you say John Grisham?
I did not, but
Is there a long legal procedure in the middle of the book?
I kind of want to see that now, but not enough to actually look for it.
It sounds a bit too like it's got the sort of deadly maze. God, what's the word? I'm forgetting all the words.
The deadly labyrinth that's common to all those John Grisham novels.
No.
Like a dungeon crawler, kind of?
It's a trope. There's a deadly maze trope made famous in sci-fi with the book Diamond Dogs by Alistair Reynolds, where there's like a tower and puzzles must be solved to progress.
Unfortunately, the only maze book I can think of is the Maze Runner trilogy.
Oh, sure.
Well, there's also the Andrew Rowe book that we both read, Rachel.
Oh, yeah.
Significantly Advanced Magic, the
Arcane
Ascension
Ascension
series, right?
Yes. Oh, I love that book. That's a great book.
Yeah, so that's another great example.
It's very much that sort of, here's a bunch of puzzles for the main character to solve in a very like Dungeons and Dragons sort of dungeon crawl.
My D&D friend, is going to force books upon me that have a very similar vibe, where like they're building the dungeon up, and the dungeon is actually a character and stuff like that.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, he bought some lit RPGs at the con we were recently at.
What con was that?
Dragon Con.
Oh, fun. I heard good things.
the con. Jeez.
I've still never been.
Yeah, me neither.
Well,
I mean,
would love to
it's
go.
on the wrong side of the country for me.
You can go to the con, Peter.
Yeah, I was at PAX last weekend. That's true.
I'm so jealous.
Anyways, I think we wrapped up on Peter's book. What book did you read, Peter, for like one more time?
Okay, for like one more time, the book that I read was called Princess of Blood by Tom Lloyd, sequel to Stranger of Tempest. I did very much enjoy it. I think both the two books that I've read so far, I feel like they started a little slow, but I'm glad I kept going. Like the author it likes to play with starting you right off in the action or some sort of high action moment and then jumping back 2 weeks or a month to show you how you led up there. And I don't find that inherently frustrating, but something about the way he's doing it makes it harder for me to kind of just settle in with all the characters. But I'm glad that I pushed through that because I really did enjoy the overall story.
Nice. All right, Rachel, grab your plushette. Consult the spirits.
Well, I guess I'll go next. So, to preface this, I read a manga, so I need to do some general terminology so people aren't confused, manga, or understand, or like been in that genre, or not genre, that medium, excuse me. The first term, I guess, is shonen, which is just a genre of manga where it's for the demographic of typically younger males, and I think that's the only term. Please stop me and if you find that there's a term that you guys don't understand.
What does term mean?
It's for like a school term. You go, that's a period of time.
Oh shoot. Now I'm confused.
The thing that means the thing.
What does thing mean though?
Oh no, Peter. Did you get rebooted?
Did I? Oh, yeah. I'm okay now.
Reinstall.
That's
Peter
right.
needed an update.
Reinstalling dictionary.
Anyways, I read Deadman Wonderland. I read the first 5 volumes of that. And that should cover the entire anime season. I did that so I can be like say that I hated the end of the anime and the manga has a much better ending. That is my opinion. It had a terrible ending. There's so many loose ends.
Rachel, you've talked about a few like animes or mangas so far on the podcast. This is the first one that I've actually watched, I think.
So you've watched this anime?
Yeah.
So what did you think of the ending?
Oh, I'll be honest with you, I don't remember the ending. When I watch things like this, I binge watch them, and so it's like in one ear and out the other. But I remember bits and pieces, and I do remember enjoying it.
I was so mad at the ending. I read the entire manga because I wanted to know what happened.
Yeah, I've also seen this anime, and I confirm the ending is not good.
That's because there's 13 volumes and they only did 5.
From my understanding, that is forced upon them based on the way that animes are made and funded.
It's unfortunate. They didn't get enough.
It's just one of those things that the medium kind of forces upon the writers a little bit.
Anyways, so Deadman Wonderland is about the main character, Ganta, and his class is obliterated in front of him, and he gets blamed for it. Yay, justice system! And he gets put on death row at the first privatized prison in Japan, Deadman Wonderland, which is very much kind of like a circus, but with prison labor, kind of.
Prison circus.
And the entire time he's trying to figure out what happened to his class, why is his entire class obliterated, who is the red man that did it, and try to win his freedom and escape the hellhole that is the Deadman Wonderland. Later, there's a very interesting magic system with blood magic, which I loved. Okay, I will say it's very grotesque, but it's not horror-esque sometimes. It's more a thriller.
That answers my question that was kind of floating in my face, which is, what makes it horror? But you're saying it's less of a horror book and more of a grotesquerie thriller?
Yeah, it's a mystery thriller with grotesque themes because they use blood magic. People get ripped in half with blood magic.
Got it.
Yeah, so that's insane fantasy element. I mean, it's hard to say it's not horror when like the very first thing that happens is a schoolroom full of children is horribly murdered by a man in a red cloak.
Yeah. Very bloody, and I would definitely say this is 18 plus because later in the manga there's very sexual themes that are not suitable for all ages.
It's funny, we keep saying 18 plus because of sexual themes. Sex is way nicer than violence. I would rather we say things are only for adults because of all the people getting hurt rather than because of the sex.
I see you take the European view.
Very much.
Mine also has rape in it, so that's why I said
Oh, absolutely. Sexual violence, sexual abuse, which we heard some of in Darkwater.
The Darkwater Bride, yeah.
Thank you. That absolutely should be, not for children. But I don't need to go off about sex versus violence and.
Yeah, I should have had a better terminology for that. Yes, it's sexual violence that it's a small amount, but it's still there, so it's definitely 18 plus and. Definitely 18 plus because of all the blood and gore that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Things I didn't like, all the shonen tropes that appear that I hate. Yep. One of the main characters is like afraid of girls for reasons that I don't understand and kind of hate. But the warden's character design I don't like. It's the big boob anime girl but she's really awesome except that she has giant boobs and I hate it.
She has impossible breasts.
Yes.
Yeah, and the male gaze kind of dominates the camera work of that show. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you something, Rachel. Do you think that the book sort of relies on like that sort of sexual stuff or the overuse of blood as a crutch, or does the story hold up by itself?
The blood thing is, I feel like it's necessary because how the powers work in the system, but the sexual stuff is more for, like, the sexual violence is backstory, which probably could have been changed, but it's mostly backstory for one of the villains to explain why he's insane.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it might have been a crutch. I'm not that good with telling if things were bad.
Got it.
Well, when you got to the end, Rachel, did you feel like it made the story better, or that you could remove all of it and you'd have essentially the same level of enjoyment?
The blood was good to the story. The sexual stuff, like in most cases, probably could have been removed.
Sure.
The letters on my screen seem to be rearranging themselves, and then dripping blood also.
A lot of blood. Oh my god.
Well, I don't know. It seems to be in theme.
Your table must be soaked.
Well, that's the funny thing. When it gets down to the table, it just kind of gets reabsorbed. And then the little Lego person sitting under my screen is like drinking it up. That's normal, right?
That's what Legos are for.
Okay, good. That's what I thought.
Yeah, that's what they're making over in Denmark. Blood-eating toys.
Denmark, home of body horror. I don't know. So my corrupted computer screen is asking me whether it would be considered a psychological horror. This manga.
Yes, I would say there's a battle element that's in the first 5 volumes, which is like a death battle kind of thing.
Like a shonen fight manga, sort of normal for that.
It has a tournament arc.
So psychological elements to the characters, but not necessarily intrinsic to the plot.
Yeah, not in the first 5 volumes. I think that gets on a little later, but I don't want to really stress on that because I didn't read it for this podcast. And I guess since we're wrapping up, I read Deadman Wonderland, and I don't want to say the authors' names because I'm afraid I'm going to mispronounce it horribly.
If you can type it in, I can probably do it for you.
I can't say. Run and get them. They're over in my book.
Oh boy, that's a tough one. Yeah, it's a lady because I could see a picture of her.
Oh, I didn't realize she was female.
Jinsei Kotaoka.
Jinsei Kotaoka.
Oh, I was right on.
Yeah, Jinsei Kotaoka.
And illustrated by Kazuma Kondou.
Nice.
I apologize.
Nice.
I just have a terrible time with pronouncing anything.
That's
no,
why
it's
I
tough.
never
We
say
want to get
anything.
that right. Yeah.
It's all good. I have a Japanese minor, so.
Where do you keep this person?
Well, if I told you, you would escape.
Well,
Now the FBI is going to raid my freaking house. Thanks, Peter. Jesus Christ.
high five.
It's interesting that it's written, the story is written by a female and it's very catered to the male gaze. I guess that could be the industry.
Oh, for sure it is, yeah.
It's more than just the industry. It's the country. It is the nation of Japan.
Yeah.
Still.
I mean, there's some cultural impact there, but yeah, I mean, it's common and demanded by publishers. Yeah.
It's getting better, I think.
That's very
Slowly,
unfortunate.
There's at least admitting that it's maybe not the best thing. It hasn't stopped or really slowed down or anything like that, but conversations at least happen around it. Well, Rachel, as the sole survivor, I look to you, my spectral friend. Is it my turn to talk about a book?
I say yes.
All right. Well, I felt it would be remiss if one of us didn't talk about Stephen King during this. So I read a Stephen King book called The Outsider. And I guess I want to preface it a little and talk about sort of Stephen King, his weird career, as long as it's been. He started out like in the 60s and 70s and is still writing pretty strong today. A lot of his earlier books, as we talked about it, like at the beginning of the show, have they've been very, very popular, among readers, but have had varying levels of critical success. Obviously, there's like a new movie out the weekend that we're recording this, which is It Part 2, which is one of his bigger successes, I suppose.
One of his bigger books, too.
Yeah, it's a huge book. This one...
Isn't the ending of It Part 2 really weird?
Well, the ending of the book is really weird.
Yeah, the book, excuse me.
Yeah, my wife and I actually went and saw the movie last night. The ending of the movie is normalized. Actually, they make a point through the whole thing to sort of talk about how endings are bad a lot of times and how it's tough to have a good ending to a story.
They talk about that in the movie?
In the movie, yeah. Well, the one of the kids grows up to be an author. Stephen King cannot help but put himself into his own books. And so,
correct. That.
The
Sometimes
author is...
literally.
Yeah, the author is like, I think one of the opening scenes in the movie is the author on the set of a movie about a book he wrote being told by the director that the ending of his book is terrible and he needs to rewrite it for the movie. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's a whole thing. And then Stephen King himself appears in the movie. So it's
as Stephen King,
as a pawn shop. So kind of Stephen King playing sort of a character that he wrote about, like in Needful Things, in the movie. Yeah, it's Stephen King.
So many layers.
Yeah, he wraps himself up in his own context.
It doesn't sound worse than the Gunslinger series, where at some point the protagonists flee across dimensions and end up taking refuge with Stephen King in his house in Maine.
Yep.
I'm getting a headache.
That's called Stephen King.
Oh, no.
I also heard that the ending of the book was very uncomfortable.
Yes. Yeah. It's a bad ending to that book because I think
still talking about it, or are we talking about?
No, we're talking about it. Yeah, I will talk about. I want to talk about this early version of King's work because I want to talk about how much he's improved in those most latest stuff. So yeah, the ending of it is really bad. There's basically all the characters have an orgy at the end. It's weird because they're like 13 at the time, I think. So it is a very strange ending to that book.
It's a strange inclusion, to be sure.
I mean, listen, the elephant in the room of Stephen King is that he did a lot of drugs while he was writing those books. And I don't think they helped in some cases.
If we were talking about cosmic horror earlier, if you said that they normalized it a bit for the movie, but the book, at least, they end up having some kind of extra dimensional battle with a cosmic spider thing that wants to eat everything.
Yes, I won't say that that's not in the movie because it kind of is.
Spoilers for It Part 2, I guess.
But it is. I feel like the movie does a much better job of. Well, I think the movie does its better job by updating to sort of present day context and tropes, building on some of the more popular recent horror movies to make its case. Ultimately, I just wanted to talk about King in terms of what he's done and how this book sort of fits into that, The Outsider. Which is interesting because, I approached this book, I assumed it was a standalone, and it's technically not. The story of The Outsider feels very familiar as it gets started, which is, there's a kind of quaint town. I think it is actually in Oklahoma this time, one of the rare.
What?
Yeah, I mean, King has actually left New England in many of his more recent books. And in this one, there's a guy who is sort of this beloved figure in the town, and then suddenly he is arrested and convicted of a terrible crime, one for which he immediately has an alibi of, which is very strange because there is an abundance of physical evidence that suggests he actually committed this crime, even though there's also an abundance of physical evidence that suggests he was not even in town during the time that crime was committed. And it leads to a really super interesting story about, the idea of like what justice is, and can a person who has been very publicly outed as the prime suspect of a crime, sort of someone who loses their innocent until proven guilty, like the capability of really even having a fair trial after he's been so publicly accused. Can someone like that really get justice? And that constitutes like the first half, I'd say, of the book. It is really like almost a crime procedural of, this person who seemingly led like a really nice life and then has their life obliterated.
Right.
And
suddenly are they actually already being punished for the crime that they haven't been convicted of?
And King does a really nice job in this one of really leading you on to like, you're not sure really kind of up until the halfway point, is this guy actually guilty? Even though you spend a lot of time with him and his family and you sort of see the stress on the family as things progress, that makes you want to believe that like he is not guilty of what's happening. You also know, like this is a Stephen King novel, so it's entirely possible that the very nice person that you're reading about is actually a secret monster. That would not be unusual in King's story. And then it kind of hits a halfway point, and there is a massive twist that I won't talk about, but it changes the nature of the story. And that's when you realize that this novel is in fact not a standalone novel, as characters start to come in from the Mr. Mercedes series. I don't know if you guys are familiar with those 3 books that King wrote about a serial killer.
The name rings a bell, but I haven't read them.
Yeah, it's another one where it's pretty recent. I think like 2014, 2015 was like around when those books came out. It's another interesting series where it starts out as almost like a police procedural about serial killers, and then eventually, adds in the second and third parts of the trilogy, the supernatural elements that King is kind of famous for. And this one does the same, but in miniature, where halfway through the book, the true villain of the piece is revealed, and it's not human. I feel like it's okay to say that, like that's not really a spoiler because of the setup, even though it's still really enjoyable to read that sort of opening half as the police procedural. Like from the get-go, I mean, the front of the book is a upside down sort of shadowy figure with glowing red eyes. That figure did not appear until sort of halfway through the book, and you get characters coming in from this Mercedes series that kind of introduce and explain that supernatural element in a very funny way. The primary piece of evidence they have is the thing that explains the supernatural element to the Scooby-Doo team is an old 70s lucha libre movie where there's a bunch of female lucha libras who are battling the monster in this very strange video that they watch and is described in the book.
This other series that gets tied into it, does it sort of explain what really happened just by being in the same universe?
No, I mean, it does what King does a lot when he's tying books together, which is you don't really need to have read the Miss Mercedes series to know what's going on. You would give you some background on a particular character that comes in, but that's not really necessary to read and enjoy this book.
Okay.
It was kind of the same for the Dark Tower series that King wrote, which is it's sort of the series that ties all his other books into a continuous universe. But if you haven't read any of those other books, the Dark Tower series is entirely enjoyable. And if you read those other books and have never touched the Dark Tower series, you're going to be perfectly fine.
I might disagree about that Dark Tower assessment.
You can miss a lot of the sort of Easter egg nature of some of the stuff that goes on in the Dark Tower, but I think the events of the Dark Tower kind of stand on their own, even if you don't necessarily, like when they introduce a particular character, you don't have the full history of where that person comes from. you don't necessarily need it because they tend to be tangential to the story.
Well, for me, without going too deep into it, for me that also left them those aspects that I didn't understand very well. It left them kind of meaningless when they were supposed to have some sort of impact. I found the last 3 books of that series nearly incomprehensible. So
I would say then probably in this case, it might bother you immensely to have this external character come in who you are supposed to know something about. I feel like it definitely would want you to have a certain emotional reaction to this character appearing in the story, which you will have no context for unless you are familiar with the Mr. Mercedes series.
Yeah, I might not enjoy that.
I, however, having read the Mr. Mercedes series, enjoyed it immensely, and it was a nice surprise in the book. So if you're a fan of Stephen King and have kept up with most of his latest stuff, you'll probably really like this one. And as endings go, it's a pretty good one. I won't say whether it's happy or not. Like Stephen King, I think he does a good job of showing the cost of the ending that he gives. But overall, I did not feel like I usually do the need to sort of recover from this book by the end, even though it's a pretty great horror novel.
Did it make you actually scared?
I'll tell you the scariest parts is actually watching this guy's life get torn apart by our legal system. That is the scariest part of this book. The supernatural elements, I don't typically find those things to be terribly scary. For me, it's much scarier when like the true cosmic horror here is like the thing that is bigger than the characters is the sort of crushing mechanism of the legal system more than it is the weird monster that's trying to eat children.
I really like that as an assessment, actually. The true cosmic horror all along was our justice system.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because I think one of the biggest criticisms that people probably have about Stephen King's old work is he oftentimes ignored a lot of the politics of the time and focused more specifically just on character. And in this, I think he finally is doing like a really nice balance of some political commentary and metaphor, while at the same time just having a really nice horror element to it.
Excellent.
I think, is that our show? Does anyone have any last comments?
Do we need to consult the Beyond? No? Okay, I think we're okay. I didn't hear anything from the Beyond.
I can't see any more messages. My eyes are just full of blood, so I have nothing more from the Beyond.
Oh my gosh.
Well, you just got to put the little Lego guy on your face. I'm sure nothing bad will happen. Probably won't drink all your blood, just the excess.
Well, since Peter is drowning, I guess we have to say goodbye. And one last thanks to our sponsor, Dave Woke Up by Daniel Evanson, which you could buy on Amazon. Anyways, so you can read our reviews on TooManyThoughtsMedia.com or our individual Goodreads, maybe. I don't know. And you can check us out individually on Twitter. And that's it. Bye.
So long.
Bye. Happy Halloween.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Happy Halloween.
And next month, we hopefully will have our Ghostly Katie back. And remember, next month we're going to be doing steampunk.